Hello, and welcome to the webinar. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes before we start. There's a few more people who are just entering the room, and we'll begin in a minute. Hello, and welcome to this webinar from Heliocentrics. I'm John Speed, and I'm going to be talking to you today about SharePoint. I know James normally does these, but he is taking a well-deserved rest on holiday this week, and so it has fallen to me to lead this webinar. Much of this webinar I want to try and do will be a bit of a demo, so you can actually see the screens, some of the screens that we play around with. So all being well, technology being with us and on our sides, hopefully there will be no technical glitches. If you have any questions as we go along, do put them into the Q&A and I will try to respond to them as they come up. I will try and cover them at the end. To access the Q&A, you should be able to choose it from the bar at the top of the screen and just put your comments in there, your questions, and we'll pick them up. So, SharePoint. So SharePoint is one of the main underused facilities inside of Microsoft 365. It, for a lot of people, is completely bewildering. They don't know what it is. It's not something that they particularly ever asked for. It's just something they've now got as part of 365. But the biggest question I get from a lot of people is what's the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint? Most people can get their heads around OneDrive, and that is where they store their personal files that they access on a regular basis. But SharePoint is where the confusion comes in. And what we normally find when we set people up with 365 is either they set up SharePoint in exactly the same way that they had when they used to have servers or NAS drives or shared folders, where they basically just have that very deep folder structure, lots of folders and subfolders, and then the files. Well, the alternative we come across quite often is where people go the opposite way, and they just stick all their files in SharePoint, in OneDrive, sorry, and then they use sharing links to go back to OneDrive each time they want to give it to somebody. And that is very confusing and can cause lots of issues if the person who authored those documents then leaves and people are still using the sharing links. So where SharePoint comes in is basically anything where you need to be able to access the shared content. The clue is in the name. OneDrive is for you, one person. SharePoint is for sharing. And it takes a bit of work to sort of split that out. And SharePoint has this formal structure of what's called libraries and lists and pages, which can sound really complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Whereas a lot of people just like the idea of just having folders that they have in OneDrive and just dumping them in. Now, one thing to add is SharePoint files can appear in OneDrive, and I'll show you that in a minute. So, just moving on to this slide, take myself off so it's a bit bigger. Just to explain the structure of SharePoint. SharePoint is a web system, it's a web app. And so you have this top level site, which will be something like heliocentrics.sharepoint.com or mycompany.sharepoint.com, whatever your 365 name is at that top. And under that, you will have multiple sites. Sites are where you start choosing who has access to what. Sites can be things like departments, things like company resources, a place to store various things we've got here. It could be some scenarios where you want to have a separate site for each client, depending on the work you're doing, or projects. And so you get these sites and they're all linked back to the main SharePoint. When Microsoft Teams came in, things were confused slightly because when you create a team, it creates a SharePoint site. And my general advice to most people is that you actually use Teams to create the sites, because then you have both benefits of Teams and sites with a common name as opposed to two separate things. So let's just flick over to show you briefly. And this would be normally when internet or lets us down. So this is our demo 365 account. So it's filled with quite a lot of rubbish, to be perfectly honest, but the idea of SharePoint is the same. So this is a demo page. It's the main site, as I mentioned to you before. This is our Ask Helio site, and you have a breakdown of page. This is a very graphical page. I think I've just got Liz has just put a hand up. I can't see the screen. Interesting. Oh, that's because I haven't done that. Sorry, Liz. There you go. Sorry. Okay, so then we get the screen up. It's a very graphical view. This is one of the template pages that comes with Microsoft. So you get nice big graphics. All of these link through to individual web pages. You can set this up, drawing buttons. This one's got some events. This is basically a web page that is meant that you can build on without having to involve the likes of IT. So for example, if I go to edit, come in here and go to quick links, or add another button in, for example, and here and say, I want a site. This is where it lets me down. Oh, I want, actually, no, I want from a link. There you go. So I can just pick up and say I want to link this to wherever I want to go. And select, I want it to go to the documents library. Just put it here, and it's put in documents. And you've got the options that you can tweak and change this yourself. Depending on how you want to do it, change the name, or we can put in text. And to see each of these things, it comes up with a plus. And some of this stuff we can go through in a little bit more detail, and we'll do in a minute. You basically go in and you get the idea. You can start putting in text. The advantage is you can just hit publish, the site is done, everybody will see what's out there. So the goal with SharePoint is to create these pages, and they can all take on a different sort of shape. So if I go back to operations site, this is just like a different one. Different layout. It's not a very nice layout, it's just something put together quickly. And it's got very graphical buttons to take you through to different pages. Finance site might just be a list of documents. So as you see, I've got a finance page, graphical page, welcoming people to the finance hub. Tools and templates, whatever's there, I can basically go into documents and I can then create folders. I said to you earlier, the documents, when you create them in SharePoint, the biggest concern I get from a lot of people is, well, I don't want all my team to have to come in here all the time to access any files. And what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to. Once you've got your folders in SharePoint, you can just choose this button to add shortcut to OneDrive. And what that will do is just inside your normal OneDrive on your computer, you will see SharePoint sites. So if I over, I appreciate if I resize this a bit bigger. This is my actual OneDrive. And you see, it's my OneDrive, John Speed Heliocentrics. I've got a folder for Heliocentrics files. And below it are links to all these different SharePoint sites. We have got a lot more SharePoint sites, and I don't link to all of them, but these are the ones I use on a regular basis. I can access any of these just as I normally would in the file system. This idea that you put things in SharePoint and they become hard to access isn't true. What we can do with SharePoint now, we've built the technology which will allow us to basically make sure everybody in the business has the same links depending on what teams that they belong to. So if you're a client of ours and you do want to make some change to SharePoint and want to roll these out, but are concerned about everybody having to click on the add shortcut button, then do come to us and we can do something to push those shortcuts out to people. But the shortcuts are there just to make life a little bit easier. They're not there to replace the whole interface of SharePoint. So once you've got SharePoint, you've got the options to have these different pages. You can create different sites. And you can create a whole sort of Wikipedia environment, if you like, your own company policies. Because when you're in here, you've got one page, yes, but you can go on and from the create button, you can create new pages or dashboards. We'll talk about lists in a minute and document libraries, but you can just go on and create a new page. It'll follow, give you some templates. So let's pick a project check-in page. Example of a page. You can use this template. Downside of doing live videos is you can't speed them up. Okay, then we're in, and it takes straight to the editing. So I don't want this in beta testing block, so I can click on that, choose the delete, get rid of it, and get rid of these sections. The most complicated thing for people is this difference between content and a section. The sections tend to be these blue bits. The section at the top is this bit. And I've got a second section, which is the main body of the text. Add a new section in here. Choose 3 columns, 1 column, whichever you like. And I can go into any of these blocks of text, and I can click on them and edit them and change them. And if I wanted to go down to the bottom, this is quite a long template, just the bottom, I can add a new one. And then I can come in, I click on this, when I hover, they get this little grey plus, that means it's a, and then you get the full range you want to put in here. So you've got text, images, Power Apps if you know what those are, banners, call to actions, videos, all sorts of things onto one page. So I hope you can see that these are an area where you can create quite a good internal Wikipedia, information about your clients. It could be that you want to use a site particularly for news and comms. If you are, for example, in HR, you might want an HR site for publishing the HR policies, but you might also want to put some recognition stuff in, some ideas for people on articles. And that's a common one that people need to get in the habit, is that you actually, close this, that you actually want to think about what the sites are going to be used for, because your permissions, who can access, are set at the site level. It's not worth trying to fiddle around setting your permissions on each individual folders. It doesn't work long term. It's better to do it on the whole site level, very top, and then everything under it's there. So I mentioned pages, document libraries. So everyone comes with a documents folder. That's the default one. But sometimes content might vary, and you want to put it in some separate logical units. There can be reasons to do that, but those are all document libraries, and you can create multiple document libraries under the same site. So, for example, this is a finance site. See here. I mean, we can have a document library for general working documents, so the day-to-day bookkeeping, transactions, stuff like that. And then I can have a separate library which is for the reports. The reports can go in there, and I can build on those reports to have all sorts of extra features that are built directly into SharePoint. So, say extra features. What are those extra features? Well, I'm going to ignore AI because this is not an AI conversation, but there are some really cool things about AI coming into this. You also get things like workflows, where you can build automation so that when a file gets added, certain things happen. The most obvious one of those, which Microsoft has made very easy, is approvals. So what you can do here is you can turn on approvals under integrate, enable approvals. I'm going to ignore the default approvers for the moment. Add a column in for approvals. I can quickly document. See, I'm feeling very inspirational with my ideas today. Close that. Refresh. I have the test document I just created. Okay, so I've got my document, perhaps it's the management reports. I want to submit this so that other people can see it. I can click on request submission. I want it to be approved. To be approved by lead. You need to review this. You submit that. And what's happening in the background, Microsoft's got some pre-built automations to make this nice and easy. It creates the approval request. This is the one that I was worried if it's going to happen quickly enough. Of course, when I've done practices, this has gone through instantly. But what you'll find, purpose of this, it will go over to Teams. This is just Teams in the browser for simplicity. And it pops up in here as an approval. There we go. Approval's coming. John sent your request. Here's the document. I can open the document, add comments. I can approve or reject the file, and that sends it back to the author that's been approved. Notification. And if I refresh this page, should update in a minute to say that it's been approved. So there you go, approved by. It says always a history. And this is the point with SharePoint, is it's historically files just existed on a server and it was very flat. You just had one file. With SharePoint, you've got this extra data you can put with things. And people who joined the AI course last week learned about additional columns that we can put in here for additional data to make AI work better. But you can build these automations, these workflows. You can access an individual file version history. You can see everything that's happened with that document. You can look back over it and jump to previous versions. You can very easily work on the same document at the same time as somebody else. Microsoft's built support for that. Word, it works brilliantly. Excel has got really good, though Excel is a lot more complicated with working with columns and rows. But you can sort of develop this further. And this is where it's sometimes worth a conversation as to how you want to do things. But it's best to divide up your files into smaller units and then build the automations and things around it. One of the common ones we do for a lot of clients is set it up so that when they create a folder in a particular location, it automatically creates child folders for them. sort of a hybrid between going the full automation and the partial automation. SharePoint also has these options for what's called lists. And lists are basically the modern replacement to all of those Excel documents that you've got lying around. You can create them in the same way as create in a list. I'm going to do a very quick one. We're running out of time because I've been talking far too much. Let's do expense tracker. This is a finance site. You would normally set this up with the columns that you want. But you basically set up this list, the columns. It creates a basic form that you can change and improve on. Breakfast today, it's in dollars, but this could be changed. So let's just say £20. The category, you can add a receipt if I had one, save it, and of course you can tie this to the workflows. The AI can tie into this, automations can tie into this. It all makes it much easier when you're starting to build out more data. It's certainly more versatile than an Excel document. You can put validation. You can also, in here, export it back to Excel if you need it for analysis. There is the options to pull this data down, and you can create different views. I appreciate I'm trying to fit into about 20 minutes and I'm already running over quite a large area, and we have got another webinar next month where we're going to talk about lists specifically and go into a bit more detail about that. I just wanted to touch on this now so you're aware of what is actually available, so that you know to come back again next month. I'm going to finish up now and just let you put any questions you have in the Q&A or the chat. Got nothing there at the moment, but I just need to plug in a little bit here that over the next few months we are doing some more training, in-person training, where we're going to spend the whole day on either Copilot on the 20th of May or on Microsoft Office. There's Microsoft Office 365. We're going to be looking at not just improving Word and Excel skills, but we're going to really focus on all those hidden bits of 365 you might not be aware of. Things like SharePoint, like lists, like To-Do, like Planner, Microsoft Forms, all sorts of things that people don't quite realize exist at the moment. So that's it for today. I hope you've taken something away from that. If you think they'd be worth doing some more very guided walkthroughs or anything like that, please do feed it back to us and we'll see what we can do. And we're going to try and put out more video content in the future. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope that was useful. We didn't have too many technical glitches. Thank you.